Quality by design is a risk-based approach for the formulation development or pharmaceutical product development, and risk assessment for the drug substance or API is the integral part of quality by design based pharmaceutical product development. The critical material attributes of the drug substance are required to be studied, are required to be evaluated for the product development, because the drug substance critical attributes will have impact onto the formulation, safety, efficacy, and manufacturability. Also, these drug product CMAs will impact stability and bioavailability. So, drug substance risk assessment requires evaluating the critical material attributes, impact on the safety, efficacy, bioavailability, stability, and manufacturability. A thorough risk assessment of the drug substance ensures regulatory compliance and the product performance. The objective of the pharmaceutical product development is to develop a robust, stable, safe, and effective product. And if you consider the generic formulation, then the main aim is to develop a stable, a robust, and bioequivalent product. Now let's see the CMAs. All the material attributes are required to be evaluated, and some of these will have the CMA, because many of the times it happens like based on to the BCS class or based on to some of the properties, some physicochemical properties, biological properties cannot be considered as CMAs because they have very low risk. But whenever evaluating the risk, all the parameters are required to be evaluated very critically. Physicochemical properties like particle size is there, solid state form or polymorph form is there, hygroscopicity, flow, and many other properties like solubility, thermal behavior or melting point is there, compatibility is there. All these parameters affect the formulation. PSD is required to be checked for its impact on dissolution, bioavailability, impurities, and uniformity. Always have a 3-tier PSD specification for the API. Then solid state form, that is polymorphism. So most stable polymorph is required to be selected, and it is required to be retained after the manufacturing and during the shelf life period. So maintain the same polymorphic form to ensure consistent solubility, stability, and bioavailability. Different polymorphs have different solubility, stability, and bioavailability. Morphology: assess whether the API is crystalline or amorphous, study its surface area, and how the API behaves during compression and the mechanical stress. Hygroscopicity: evaluate the moisture absorption and its effect on the stability. If the API is hygroscopic in nature, then you will need to protect it from moisture, and you will need to design the perfect packaging so that the hygroscopic behavior can be controlled, and you will also need to manufacture the product under low RH conditions. So one by one risk assessment can be done, and based on that risk you can have your control strategy points. Thermal behavior is required to be considered. Check the melting point, whether the API is having low melting point or not. Based on that you can develop your process of manufacturing. Critically evaluate the solubility and pH profile, whether the API is soluble, insoluble, poorly soluble, and whether it is showing pH dependent solubility or not. Understand the BCS class of the API. BCS classes are based onto the solubility and permeability like BCS 1, 2, 3, and 4. Excipient compatibility is required to be studied. by doing the drug excipient compatibility study, conduct the DSC FTIR studies, evaluate the RS and impurity profiles of the API in contact with the excipients. Then dissolution and bioavailability. Dissolution profile is required to be checked in different medias. Understand and evaluate the BCS class. You can do the literature search to have information on the BCS class. Generally, if the API is belonging to BCS class 1 and 3 or 3, then solubility will not have much impact. But if the API belongs to BCS class 2 and 4, then you will have challenge of the particle size, solubility and the permeability. Then understand the intrinsic dissolution rate to ensure that whether the dissolution rate is rate limiting step or not. Then permeability and absorption. Check the bioavailability of the reference formulation if you are working onto the generic formulation. Assess significant deviations in the permeability. Then the important point is stability considerations. Understand and evaluate or do the force degradation studies, API stability profile and shelf life for the packaging development. Force degradation studies are evaluated under acid-base oxidative thermal and photolytic stress to understand the degradation pathways. API stability can be done to understand the intrinsic stability of the API. Shelf life and packaging. Conduct accelerated stability testing and confirm the packaging suitability. Regulatory and compliance. Pharmacopoeial compliance with pharmacopoeias like USP, BP, EP, IP, JP standards, whether they are available or not in the monographs, or if these pharmacopoeias are not containing the, or if there is no monograph, then the in-house testing should be performed and those tests should be complying to the pharmacopoeias. Impurity profile should be in line to the ICH guidelines, USFDA guidelines, EMA guidelines and other country specific guidelines. Then evaluate for the nitrosamines whether the API is prone to the nitrosamine or NDSRI formation. Understand the information about genotoxic and elemental impurities and have the declaration of these in hand. Regulatory filing, determine whether DMF is applied or not, whether it is active or not, determine if FDA obtained ANDA variation or CMC supplement is required, then supplier GMP compliance, confirm GMP certifications and review COA, DMF, stability data and residual solvents. Always have the data for PSD trend and always understand the regulatory compliance by having the 3 to 4 lots from different vendors. Then you can do the risk assessment for regulatory compliance. Manufacturing and process impact. Understand the flowability and compressibility. Evaluate for the bulk density, tap density, Cars index and Hausner's ratio. Evaluate the impurities. Evaluate the residual solvents are present or not. Determine the flow and assess effect on the manufacturing processes like granulation, roller compaction and its impact onto the blend uniformity. Granulation suitability is required to be checked considering the force degradation and API sensitivity. Check performance of the API in dry granulation, wet granulation and direct compaction. So that will be in the prototype development. Determine bulk density, tap density, then blending and scale up. Confirm the blend uniformity. That is the part of prototype development. Consider the API CMAs which may impact the in vivo behavior. B studies. So conduct dissolution profiles and different in different medias. Pharmacokinetics are required to be assessed. Then risk assessment and final decision is required to be made. So summarize findings to justify equivalence with the different sources, or if you are working onto a new API, then consider the old one and perform the equivalence and justify the equivalence. If you are using it for first time, then you can gather all the information. You can give some risk to the CMAs. Like if the API is BCS class 2 or 4, you can give high risk for the solubility, particle size and dissolution. Then compliance with the ICH Q12 is required and then it will come to the implementation. So in summary, API source is required to be checked for the scientific, regulatory, and process evaluations. If you are working on to the alternate vendor source, then equivalency is required to be understood and thoroughly checked. Then risk assessment and compliance check is critical before implementation. So by this risk assessment, you can have the proper mitigation strategy in your hand. You can select the best process, packaging, and you can have the complete understanding about the quality by design principles based on to the risk assessment of the drug substance or API. And by this mechanism, you can develop a robust and stable product. Thank you for watching the video.